Philippians chapter 2. Do you guys mind if we dive right in? Is that okay with you guys? Can we just jump right in? Okay, you guys look like you came prepared. So we're just going to go in the deep end, fully clothed. The water's a little bit cold, but hopefully you are ready. Philippians chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 19. So good to see you, Robin. Robin's over here. David's over here. Man, I am good. This is going to, this sermon better be fire, okay? Philippians chapter 2. That's right. Goodness and mercy. That's right. Shall follow you. Robin and David shall follow you all the days of your preaching. Philippians chapter 2. Let's get started before I get too distracted. So check this out. Philippians chapter 2. We've been going through the book of Philippians. If you're just joining us, it's a letter written by a guy named Paul to a church 2,000 years ago in Philippi. And I think we're 10 weeks, who knows, into it. But it's been pretty awesome. Look at what Paul says in verse 19. He says, I hope, Paul says, in the Lord Jesus to send my boy Tim to you soon, that I may also be cheered when I receive news about you. Quick historical reminder / context / heads up for all of us, those of us who grew up in an era where all you have to do to check on your friends and family is pick up this little mini computer in your pocket and push a couple buttons and you can see how they're doing. Right? The reason Paul is talking in this passage about sending his friend Tim to the people he's writing to so that he can receive news back about them is because when Paul wrote this letter, this was in an era where they didn't have cell phones, believe it or not. They didn't even have flip phones or landlines or email. Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet, right? And so none of that was happening. And so back when Paul wrote this letter, the only way, just think about this, the only way to know how people were doing or to get information about your loved ones that didn't live within close physical proximity was to find a messenger, send that messenger to your people, wait until that messenger travels all the way over there, and then wait until they travel all the way back with a response. Can I show you guys what I'm talking about? Can I put it in perspective for you? Adam, you want to help me preach a little bit? You mind helping me? You want to come on up, help me preach? You look nervous. I'm not going to give you the mic. I just need to put this in perspective. Come on around. Don't worry. You're not actually preaching. I just need you to actually run me an errand. Can you do me a solid? Can you run me an errand? He's got my back. Give a hand for Adam, everybody. I just want to put this in perspective for you. So some of you guys know my wife and I, we got 5 daughters, and my youngest daughter, Lola, I don't know, last couple of weeks, she's been having a little bit of a hard time going into her kids' class, and so she did it last week. It was awesome, and she did it this week, but I didn't get to see her when she went in there, and so this whole time at worship, I'm wondering, like, how's she doing in class? Like, I don't know how she's doing, and so I'm wondering if you can go over to the 5 and just see how she's doing over there, and just kind of take a peek, see if she's doing all right, and then come back. There's a police officer out there, but I told him that some guy is going to be coming. And, hey, no, don't leave yet. He's going to come, and it's going to look kind of creepy because you're going to just peek in the class. You know Lola, right? She's curly hair. She's got like a full walk. Okay, yeah, okay. Just see how she's doing, and then, like, in the least creepy way possible, and then come back and let me know how she's doing. Does that sound good? Okay, all right. Thanks, Adam. Give me a hand. Actually, hey, hang on. Come on, one more thing. I totally forgot. I actually would love for you to actually tell her something. So hang on. Come on. Yeah, just real quick. Okay, you got it? All right, thanks, bro. Appreciate it. Okay, awesome. One more thing, real quick. Hey, real quick, Adam, you can't even hear me. I'm not going to preach until you come back, so can you hurry? Like, can you, like, I don't know if you're a fast runner or not. Okay, thanks, my man. I appreciate it. All right. What do you guys want to do? I don't know. I'm serious. I'm literally not going to preach until this guy sing. You want me to sing? You want the band to come back up, build your church one more time? Does that sound good? Just kidding. Okay, verse 19. Okay, this is important. Paul says, I'm going to send Timothy to you, right? Like I just sent Adam. You can come back, by the way. He's not really going to the 5, okay? I don't know. Well, maybe he did. I was whispering to him not to go, but maybe he's an overachiever and he's going to go over that. I didn't tell the cop he was coming, so he probably is not going to make it in there. But, okay, there he is. Hey, give a hand for Adam. Yeah. You guys get the idea, right? Paul's like, hey, I'm going to send Timothy to you so that when Timothy goes all the way over there and he's going to find out how you're doing and then he's going to come back and he's going to tell me and then I'm going to be excited. And then listen to what Paul says here in verse 20. He says, I have no one else like him. We're going to come back to that in a little bit, who will show genuine concern for your welfare. Everyone, Paul says, looks after for their own interests, not those of Christ Jesus, verse 22. But you know Tim, right? He's proved himself. Because as a son with his father, he served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope, Paul says, therefore, to send him as soon as I can, as soon as I see how things are going with me. Paul's in prison right now, and he's not sure if they're going to let him go or if they're going to take his life. And so he's like, I don't know how things are going to go down, but as soon as I know, I'm going to send him. He's going to come all the way over to you. And I am confident, he says, in the Lord that I myself will come soon. And everybody said, don't know, don't care. Right? Am I right or am I right? I mean, probably not what you want to hear from a pastor / preacher, but I'm just going to keep it real with you guys. When we were preparing for this series and I got to this part of the series, I'm like, can we just skip this? Right? Anybody with me on there? I'm thinking to myself, I'm like these are the kind of verses in the Bible that I just tune out. You know how sometimes you read and you just kind of skip, I want to fast forward through this because why in the world, this is what I'm thinking to myself, why in the world would Paul think that I care to hear about his business with people that I don't know? Right? I mean, it was a great conversation. Philippians chapter 2 at the very beginning was amazing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Paul's like, let me tell you about Tim. And I'm going to send him to these people and find out how they're doing. And he's going to come back and tell me how they're doing. And I'm like, who cares? Right? That's literally my initial response because I don't know any of these people. Can we go to the other stuff that's interesting? Can we skip ahead to I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? I can do something about that. Can we go to do not be anxious about anything in chapter 4? That relates to my life. I'm not sure that all of this or any of this matters to me, and I don't really care. Right? I was thinking about it, and it kind of reminded me of when our oldest daughter, baby, was going to TCS. And she joined the choir, and they had a concert, and my wife and I went. Do you remember this, babe? When we went to her first choir, and we got there early, and we sat in the front row because we were pumped. We got popcorn. We got, not really, but we were excited. Well, this is going to be a great concert. And it was, until we found out that we had to listen to other people's kids sing. Anybody? Am I keeping it too real? Any parent know what I'm talking about? Right? Please, show of hands if you've ever had to endure the cruel and unusual punishment of ever having to watch other people's kids do anything, right? Sorry, not sorry, but unless it's my kid or I know you or we're connected in some way, you go to our church or whatever, like if I don't know you, I don't really want to sit in a high school gym on a Monday evening and listen to your kid try to play the trombone. I'm like, I just don't really care. For the same reason that when I read passages like this, I'm thinking to myself, Paul, I just don't really care, right? And the temptation is to fast forward and to skip through it. But upon further review, I took my time, and all of a sudden, this passage that I was tempted to just gloss over started to come alive. And I promise if you would just hang with me while I read the remaining 4 to 5 verses and you don't sneak out to go watch Black Widow in the next theater, that it's all going to come together and you're going to appreciate it. I know it's a little bit dry, but just hang with me for a second. I promise it's really good. Listen to what Paul says in verse 25. So not only does he talk about his buddy Tim that none of us really know or care about, he starts talking about another friend of his. Listen to what he says in verse 25. He says, but I think it's necessary to send back to you, and this one is, check out this name, right? I mean, I wonder where his mama got this name. Epaphroditus. Or Pop, as his high school friends like to call him in the playgrounds. So that's where he spent most of his days, right, David? Chilling out, maxing, relaxing. Okay, sorry. I'll move on. Some of you get that in a second. There it is. Okay, all right. I should keep going. Verse 25. It's necessary, he says, to send Pap back to you, my brother, my co-worker. He says, my fellow soldier, who is also a messenger who you sent to take care of my needs. So they're just sending people back and forth. And now he's talking a little about this guy named Epaphroditus. And it says, for he longs for all of you. And he is distressed because you heard that he was ill. Verse 27, indeed, he was ill, and he almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but God had mercy on me also to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Verse 28. Therefore, Paul says, I am more eager to send him, Epaphroditus, back to you, so that when you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. Does anybody remember back in the day, like way back in the olden days, when we only did two things on Facebook? We poked each other, and we used our status to update people on what's going on in our lives. Anybody remember this? Like, anybody remember the day, like Jenna, way back, when the most dramatic thing that happened on Facebook was someone you hadn't seen in a long time poked you, and you're like, ooh. All right, it's kind of weird, you know, and your significant other is kind of mad. I don't believe she poked you. What is that? I mean, seriously, I remember having these conversations like, why did that person poke me? Anybody remember poking on Facebook? Like that was like the most dramatic thing on Facebook. And do you remember there was a time where your status update was meant to update people on your status? Right? It was far less about updating us on your opinions, but it was far more like, hey, you know, like baby mama just came back and it went great, and here's a picture of the cute baby, and we're all like, oh, that's so cute, poke, 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 you know, sign up Facebook. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, it's a whole different conversation today, but that's what your status update was, and believe it or not, that's what Paul is doing in this passage. They didn't have Facebook, I'm pretty sure, in the first century. But what Paul is doing here is he is updating everybody on the status of his team. Right? He's writing the letter, and he's like, hey, I just want you guys to know, I heard that you guys heard that Epaphroditus was sick, and he had to be admitted to Flower Hospital, and you guys are worried, but I just want you to know that he's doing good now. He's not as sick as he was before, and I'm just kind of throwing that out there so you guys are updated on how he's doing. Therefore, he says in verse 28, I'm going to send them back to you so that when you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. I know you guys are bored, but hang with me here. I promise you this is so good. Verse 29. So then, he says, I want you to welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and I want you to honor people like him because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help that you yourself could not give me. Da, da, da. All right, look at your neighbor and say, da, da, da. I look at the other neighbor that you didn't pick and say, sorry, I didn't pick you. I don't know why. This is kind of awkward now. Da, 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 why? Da, 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 plot twist. Right? Da, da, da. The more I read this, the more I go from I'm kind of bored to now I'm kind of inspired. Right? Da, da, da. The more I read this, the more I start thinking to myself, man, I want to be like Paul. Right? Da, da, da. The more I read this, the more I am blown away that Paul was that rare kind of person that was so secure in his identity and so solid in his faith and so selfless in his posture that he had margin in his life to be considerate about people whose circumstances were not even half as bad as his was. Quick reminder for those of you who don't remember, when Paul wrote this, Paul wasn't hanging out at Starbucks. Okay, I went to Starbucks on Friday, I think it was. Liz was over there. She got her headphones on, a nice little drink, and she's working. It's air conditioned. It was perfect. I was like, wow, I feel like I want to work. It's my day off, but I feel like I just need to. That's not what Paul was doing when he wrote this letter. Paul wrote this letter while he was literally chained to a guard, waiting to find out if he was going to be executed for his faith. And yet, somehow, just imagine that. Imagine that you were in that situation and you're writing a letter and you're not sure if this is the last letter that you are going to be writing to your loved ones. This may be the last thing they ever hear from you. That's what's going through Paul's mind while he's writing the letter to the Philippian church. And yet, somehow, this guy in that place found it in his heart to think about Timothy and to think about Epaphroditus and go, I know he was sick, and not only was Paul worried about his friends, Epaphroditus, but he was worried about people who knew that he was sick and how they felt. And so he's like, man, I just need you guys to know that he is doing good because I don't want you to have any kind of anxiety. The guy is about to be executed possibly for his faith. And somehow he found margin in his heart to start giving a whole bunch of shout outs. Right? Rather than do what I would have done, which is throw myself a big old pity party like, hey, everybody, in case you missed it, I'm in chains, okay? Be praying for me. Come visit me, send me some things in the mail. I don't know if you can get some. That's what I would have done. Rather than throw a pity party for himself, Paul decides that he's going to ask the church to throw a party for his friends, a party that he wasn't able to attend. Listen again to what he says in verse 29. We're going to just kind of set up camp here. So then, he says, I want you to welcome him, Epaphroditus, in the Lord with great joy and then honor people like him. If you have a Bible with you, I want you to underline the word honor because that's our word of the day. Paul says, I want you to honor not only Epaphroditus, but I want you to honor people like him. Not sure what you picture in your mind when you hear the word honor. But when I was preparing this, 6 or 7 weeks ago, this was like the first thing that came into my mind. Can you throw that picture on the screen? Right? I don't know if you guys know who that is. If you don't know, that's Lionel Messi, and arguably one of the greatest football players in the world. Soccer. Okay, sorry. Forgot I was talking to Americans, right? Football to the rest of the world, soccer to you guys. That's a different sermon. And he just won the Copa America, and they're celebrating. It was a couple months ago. It's pretty incredible. And I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But my guess is that when you look at that picture, your eyes immediately went to the guy in the air, right? Right? That's our focus, right? Like when we see something like this, automatically our natural lean is to be focused on the guy that's been tossed in the air. And I just want to just maybe shift your focus a little bit and just ask you to move your eyes from the guy that's been tossed to the people who are tossing him. Right? And I know a lot of them, their backs are turned towards the camera so you can't see, but there's the one guy in the corner there over there that I just love his face. And I want you to just pay attention for just a second to the joy in his face. Okay, I want you to just look at what's happening in that guy's face because I think it's a reminder for you and I this morning that joy in this situation is not just meant for the person being tossed in the air, right? I think this picture is a great reminder that there's plenty of joy for the people who are tossing that person in the air. Okay, and I don't want to oversimplify this morning's conversation, but when I think of what Paul's talking about here, when he talks about honor, that's what Paul is talking about, right? That's what it means to honor people, right? Honoring people means that we're going to lift them up in the air. Right? Honoring people means that we're going to take our eyes off ourselves long enough to be able to see what God is doing in the lives of someone else. And not only are we going to see it, but we're going to do whatever we can to actually lift that person up. Honoring people means that we're going to reject the insidious lie that so many of us have believed that there is only joy in being the person being tossed in the air. And what Paul is inviting you and I to be a part of today is a story in which there's plenty of joy for the people who are tossing the person in the air. Paul says, I want you to not only throw a party for this guy, but I want you to honor him, and I want you to lift up people like him. And what I love about this the most, and I don't know if you caught it or not, is that Paul didn't just say, hey, I want you to honor Timothy and Epaphroditus, so let's move on now to regularly scheduled programming, right? I love that Paul spends 11 verses talking about these cats. Do you know why? I mean, think about that. He's writing a letter. It's maybe his last letter to the church, his last words. And in the middle, I would have saved it for the end. You know the PS at the end of the email? Hey, P.S., Epaphroditus, shout out, peace, deuces, my man, right? But he doesn't do that. No, in the very middle of his letter, he spends 11 verses talking about people that you and I are like, I don't care about any of those people. Do you know why Paul did that? Paul did that because Paul believed in honor. Paul did that because Paul knew what most of us have never realized or have forgotten. Paul knew that there is honor for people. There is joy, rather, in it for the people who honor others. Paul spent 11 verses in his letter talking about Timothy and Epaphroditus and how they're doing, because Paul was that rare kind of person that somehow had the capacity to be happy for other people even when things were going bad for him. You ever been around someone like that? You ever been around someone that they're genuinely happy for you even though like everything is going south for them? Right? You ever been around someone that you know, like you get a promotion and they're excited for you and you know they just got demoted, right? You ever been around that person that, you know, they're asking you about their vacation and they haven't been on a vacation since 79, you know, and they're just going, that just looks amazing and I'm just so excited. You ever been around that person that they're actually genuinely excited to see your kids play the trombone? They don't even know you or your kids and they're like, whose kid is that, man? That kid is amazing. You ever been around somebody that they come in your house and instead of looking at all the things and going in their heart like, oh, I don't know how they can afford that, they're like, this is amazing. Wow, your garage is bigger than my whole house, but that's amazing. Isn't it great that God, have you ever been around, isn't it refreshing? Come on now, church, talk back to me here. Isn't it refreshing to be around people like that? Right? Isn't it a breath of fresh air? Doesn't it feel so good to be around people who are inspired and not threatened by your success? Doesn't it feel good to have people around you who want to lift you up and not pull? Doesn't it feel good when you have good news? And you know that friend that you're like, man, I want to, like, that's the first person you want to call. Right? I hope you have friends like that something amazing happened to you and you're like, wow, man, like, I mean, I'm single, they're single, but I'm about to tell them that I just met somebody. Even though I know that they're single, I know that they're going to be excited for me. It's amazing to be around those people. But the question I'm hoping that you're asking yourself right now is, am I that kind of person? Right? Isn't that who you want to be? Right? I mean, even if you're here and you're not a church person, you're not, you know, I'm not sure about God. I mean, don't you want to be that kind of free? I want to be that kind of free. I want to be that kind of secure. I want to be the kind of free and the kind of secure that if somebody comes and they tell me something or I found out something's going on, I want to be the loudest person in their corner cheering them on regardless of what's going on in my life. I want to be that kind of man. I want to be that kind of leader. I want to be that kind of husband. I want to be that kind of friend. I want to be that kind of neighbor. Paul's sitting there, man, possibly about to lose his life. And he's like, yo, let me tell you about my boy, Epaphroditus. Have I told you about Tim? Man, you should throw a party when he gets back. Can we surprise him? Right? I mean, he's writing this letter, but hopefully he doesn't read the letter on the way. You know, I'm going to seal it. And then you guys are going to open it, and we're going to be like, surprise! And Pop's like, oh, man, that Paul guy, he got me again. All right? It's the kind of people that we want to be. If your answer to that is yes, if you're listening in the room online and you're going, yeah, man, I want to be that kind of person, and I'm not sure if I'm that kind of person, but I would love to be that kind of person. Here's the good news. Right? I'm not sure that you can pray yourself into that kind of person. I'm pretty sure you can't read yourself into that person. But here's the good news. I am certain that you can practice your way into that kind of living. I know most of us would prefer to walk in the room and pastor lays his hands on you and you're like, woo, I'm that kind of person. That's not how it works. It's going to take some practice. And so I just want to share with you before we get out of here just some practical ways to do this. I want to give you 3 practical ways, 3 ways to practice honor, right? And I believe that when we practice honor, it leads us into the kind of freedom and the kind of, this is the life that you want. If I pass the mic around and say, who do you want to be at the end of your life? When you're in the coffin and your friends and your family come up and they talk about your life, what do you want them to say? I think most of us would say that we want the people in our lives to say about us what we're saying about Paul. And what I'm telling you this morning is that in order for us to be those kind of people, there are certain things that we have to put into practice in our lives. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a start. And you put these 3 things into practice, and I promise that you will be this kind of free. 3 ways that we practice honor. Number 1 is that we have to learn to choose to be unfair and partial. Let me say that again. We got to learn to be unfair and to be partial. Several months ago, I was watching the ESPYs, like the sports award show, and I don't remember who it was, but there's an athlete, and she just won an award, and she came up to give the acceptance speech, and she said something that kind of got me a little shook. She's like, and this is probably not that unusual, but she got up there, and she's like, man, this is amazing. I didn't get here by myself. She's like, there's so many people to thank, but I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm just going to say general thank you. You know who you are. Thank you. Right? And people clap because, like, that's honorable. Like, I get it. It's a long list. You probably didn't get up there by yourself. You don't want anybody to feel left out. Is it just me, or is anyone else finding it interesting that when Paul was faced between the decision of being fair to all or unfair to some, he chose unfair to some? Right? I mean, make no mistake about it. And Paul talks about it in this life. There were so many people who were in Paul's camp. There were so many people on his team. There were so many other people who were helping him and encouraging him. And somehow Paul did not let that stop him from giving a shout out to Timothy and Epaphroditus. Paul's going, I know that somebody's going to read this letter and go, oh man, why didn't I get a party? Pap always gets all the party and Timmy gets all of the love. Paul's like, I know that, but I'm not going to let that stop me from giving out honor. I love the way Andy Stanley puts this. He says, you have to do for one what you wish you could do for all. Do for one what you wish you could do for all. I think that there's some of us in the room and online today that the reason that we don't live this life of honor is because we've considered in our hearts that, hey, man, if I can't do it for everybody, then I'm not going to do it at all. And if I can't thank everybody, then I'm just going to do a general thank you. And if I can't get everybody to be tossed in the air, then we're not going to toss anybody at all. And I would just love to propose for your consideration this morning that the worst case scenario is not that some people are left out. The worst case scenario is that everybody's left out, right? The worst case scenario is not that only some people get that tossed in the air. No, the worst thing that could happen is nobody gets tossed in the air, right? And I'm just throwing this out there for all my Enneagram 2s and all my people pleasers in the room. I get it. I understand that this is hard. But here's what I hope you see this morning. When you do for one what you wish you could do for all, you are actually doing the best thing for all. Okay, let me say that again. When you do for one or two people what is in your heart to do for everybody, you're actually doing the best thing that you can do for everybody. And the reason you're doing the best thing you can do for everybody is because when you do for one what you wish you could do for everybody, you are creating a culture of honor for everybody. Let me say it a different way. Rather than look at it and say, who am I leaving out? What if we looked at it and say, who am I inviting into the privilege of helping lift other people up? When you look at that picture, the question is not, man, only, well, can you imagine if one of the teammates were like, yeah, of course Messi gets tossed in the air, best player in the world, look at him, and I don't believe, no. Everybody came to be a part of it. Everybody jumped in. The point wasn't that now that we've tossed him in the air, now we got to toss everybody, okay? There's like 97 people on the team, and so let's just form a line right now because we're trying to be fair to everybody. Okay, so your turn, you get tossed, you get the media, everybody's gone like, oh, we got to toss everybody to make sure that we cover everybody. No, I think honor demands that we are unfair and that we are partial. And that sometimes being unfair is the most loving thing that you can do for everybody in the room. And I just want to free somebody up in here that's maybe disqualified themselves or missed out an opportunity to honor people because you don't want people to be left out. No, when you honor people, it's actually one of the best things that you can do for everybody else because you're inviting them into the joy of lifting people up. Does this make sense to you guys? Are you tracking with me? Are you with me, fam? Okay, let me know online if you're with me. I'm looking on my phone right now. My mom's watching. That's amazing. Number 2 way to practice our way into honor is that we have to choose to be specific and be a little extra. For those of you who don't know what extra means, I know David does. That's extra. It's a good example, and I like it. Listen to how Urban Dictionary defines extra. I thought this was great. Excessive, dramatic behavior, doing the absolute most. I love this example. So basically, when your Aunt Linda asks for the fourth time why you're still single and then declares, who am I to judge, loud enough for everyone at the dinner table to hear, she's being extra. Somebody say amen. And I know that a lot of times in our culture, extra is often used in a negative connotation, but how many of you know that being extra can be a positive force to championing people, right? And one of the things that we see in this passage is that in order to honor people, not only do we have to be a little bit partial and a little bit unfair, but I think in order to honor people, we got to be specific and we got to be a little bit extra. Let me show you how extra Paul was in this. Not sure if you caught it earlier, but this literally got me laughing. I was laughing by myself in my office reading the scripture. Listen to what Paul says about Timothy in verse 20. I hope you think this is hilarious. I thought it was hilarious, but that would be awkward if you don't think it's funny. But listen to what he says. Paul's talking about Timothy, and he says this. He says, I have no one else like him. And I was like, really? No one? I mean, think about it. Of all the people that Paul had around him, all the people championing him, all the people helping him, all the people leading with him, Paul's like, let me tell you about, you ever been around someone that talks like that? Man, I got to tell you about Timothy. Bro, I've never met anybody like Timothy. Like, ever. Like there's no one else. Like, Paul's like, I have nobody. I'm like, really, Paul? Nobody? He's like, nobody, bro, nobody. But he takes it a step further. Listen how extra he gets. He shows genuine concern for me. For everyone looks out for their own interest. Everyone? Come on, anybody with me? Isn't that a little dramatic? It's like, yo, let me tell you about Tim, man. There's nobody like him. Everybody else, they just care about everybody else, including all of you guys who are reading, those of you online. Everybody else, nobody else cares. They only care about their own interest. But let me tell you about my boy Tim, man. I was like, no one else like him. Paul's a little extra in his affection. But I love that he's also super specific. Listen to what he says in verse 20. Is this getting exciting to anybody else? I was like so pumped. I was like, man, this is such a boring passage to preach from. I'm like, this is amazing. Listen to what he says in verse 25. Hopefully you can feel my excitement because this is great. Listen to what he says in verse 25. Now it's talking about Epaphroditus. He says, I want to send back Epaphroditus to you, right? My brother. My brother. You ever been around, Aaron? You ever met somebody that, like, you're not related, but they feel like your brother? You're like, you know what I'm talking about? You're like, man, it's like, this is my bro. Like, it's like I feel like we just met, but man, I feel like you're like my brother from another mother. That's what Paul is saying. Paul's like, man, let me tell you about Epaphroditus, man. That dude, man, he's like my brother. Like, can you feel the emotions? He's like, no, actually, you know what? He's my brother, but he's more than that. He's not just my brother. He's my coworker. Right? He puts in the work. He gets in the grind. He's my brother. Actually, you know what? He's more than my brother. He's more than he's a soldier. Right? Do you guys feel? He's like, that's the guy that I want to pull with me in the foxhole. How extra is that? There's no one like Tim. There's no one. Everybody else is looking after their own, but Tim, he's the man. And Epaphroditus, oh man, it's my bro, my coworker, my fellow soldier. Honoring people, lifting them up means that we are unfair, we're partial, we're specific, and we're a little bit extra. And last but not least, it means that we are public and we're a little loud. Come on, Aaron Kent. I'm just going to come over here with Aaron and Robin and my peoples over here who are a little loud. I've shared this so many times, but I'm the loud guy at my kids' games. And my wife gets so embarrassed. She elbows me, and sometimes we don't even sit together. Like, I'm just like, you sit over there, and I'll sit over there. I can't even sit. And she's like, you can be excited, but you don't have to, like, be loud. And I'm like, that's the point. Anybody with me on that? That's the point. I want to be loud. I want her to hear me, and I want everybody else to hear me. Right? It's not just that I want my daughter to hear me. No. I want the whole place to know that, hey, that's my daughter. Yeah, that one right there. Yep, that's her. I want everybody to hear me. And as I was reading through this passage, I was thinking to myself, if all Paul wanted to do, think about this, if all he wanted to do was encourage Timothy and Epaphroditus, he could have just slid into their DMs, right? He could have just shot them a text. He could have pulled them aside. He could have written them a letter. Hey, Timothy, I just want you to know, man, you're the man. I appreciate you, man. You know, like, yeah, what's up, man? Epaphroditus, you know, man. You know you're my boy. You know, he could have said all of that, but he didn't. He decided he was going to take 11 verses in the middle of his letter to give them a shout out. Why? Because that's the point of honor. Because what makes honor special, don't miss this, is that it goes beyond the scope of personal encouragement. Personal encouragement is a thing that the Bible calls us to do. It's biblical. It's amazing. But honor is next level. Personal encouragement is I'm going to text you, I'm going to email you, I'm going to pull you aside and tell you what I see in you and tell you what God's doing in you. Honor is like, nah, man, I'm going to get on the biggest soapbox I can. I'm going to get the mic and I'm going to give him the thumbs up and tell Bethany to crank it up because I want the whole room to hear what I'm about to say. The reason Paul takes all of these verses to talk about these people that most of us don't care about is because that's what honor does. To honor someone requires us to be loud and public. What's special about honor is that the person being honored not only gets to be encouraged by what you're saying, but they get to be encouraged by what you're saying, and they get to be encouraged by the affirmation of everybody else that's in the room. I can't tell you guys how many times I've been encouraged by so many people in this room, right? How many emails, right? Chris always emailing me, Deb emailing, always texting me after every service. I love it. It's incredible. But I'll tell you what, I will never, ever forget. I don't know how many of you guys were in the room or online. A couple months ago, when Joe came up in the middle of the service and took mic from me, man, it's different. And he could have pulled me aside and said those same things, and my heart would have been full. But when somebody comes and grabs the mic and they honor you and encourage you, and everybody else in the room goes, yes, we see that, we affirm that, we're behind that. There's nothing like it. It's nothing like it. I'll never forget that moment. And I wasn't there. Obviously, we don't know what happened when Epaphroditus got to the people with the letter. But can you imagine how he felt when they were reading the letter to the Philippian church and they got to the part where they start talking about Epaphroditus and they're like, there he is in the front row. My brother, my coworker, the soldier. Can you imagine how encouraged he was when the Philippian church got together and they just started tossing Epaphroditus in the air like Lionel Messi. And they're like, woo! Ole, 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 ole. And everybody's just celebrating him. Or better yet, can you imagine how much delight that brought to the heart of God? I can't speak for any parents in here, but I'm guessing we're all on the same page when I say that is there anything better than when your kids honor each other? Right? I mean, is there anything? I mean, it's one thing for you to be like, here's what I see in you. But we took Lola to go play soccer the other day, and it's this little, it's like 3-year-old soccer. They're not really doing much, but man, to see Nora just run on the field and give her a big hug and look her in the face, and you did so good. I'm so proud of you. And I was just like, I'm sitting over here crying, I mean, there's nothing better. Can you imagine what that does to the heart of God when we honor each other? When we encourage each other privately, but we honor each other publicly, and we don't care about being fair. And we don't care if we're being a little bit obnoxious. That's the point. We're going to be loud, and we're going to be a little bit extra in our affection for others. I don't remember who said this, or I would quote them, but I heard a preacher say, and I thought it was so good. He says, glory belongs to God, but honor is for men. Glory to God, but the honor is for men. Listen to how Paul put it in Romans chapter 12, verse 10. He says, outdo one another in showing honor. I am a really competitive guy, so he had me at outdo one another. I don't care what he puts over there. I'm like, what? We get to, there's something that we're going to compete. I got to be better than somebody, right? I mean, I'm competitive of everything. I'm competitive with my kids. Ask my wife, bedtime, first up the stairs. You know, we run up the stairs. I'm kicking Lola and pushing them down. No, I'm serious. I'm like, that's life. Get better, get stronger. Kind of kidding, but not really. They're competitive too, so they're like, oh, I'll get you next time. But think about this though, fam. Paul says, I want you to outdo one another. Imagine if we're competitive about honor. Imagine if you wanted to honor and say, oh man, you beat me to it. Imagine being a part of a church culture, a family culture, a neighborhood culture where this was second nature, where this was normal, where honor is what we do. Right? It's not this weird anomaly thing. No, it's normal for us to honor each other. It's like when you try to open the door for somebody, you know, sometimes you open the door and they're like, you first. Like, no, you go. You want me to go? Who's going to go? That's what Paul's saying. I want you to do that. I want you to outdo one another in honoring people. And what I think it's amazing about the culture that we live in today is that it's never been easier to honor people. All right? Every one of us got some kind of platform somewhere. Maybe you can't walk up and interrupt me and take the mic, but you got a platform. And I was just thinking the other day, this is not really a sermon, but instead of using all these social platforms to yell at each other about whatever political thing we're disagreeing about, what if we used our platform to just honor people? To just say, man, I just want to tell you about so-and-so, man. Wow, there's nobody else like them. For most of us, the problem's not that we don't see what God's doing in the life of others. The problem is that we don't say it, or we're too focused on ourselves. And Paul's inviting us into the joy. This isn't like do it because that's what good Christians do kind of message. This isn't like I hope you feel better. No. There is a joy. There is a freedom for people who honor others. There is a joy in being the person who gets to toss other people up in the air. There's so much more joy in tossing people than we've been led to believe. And so this morning, I invite you into that joy. I invite you into that practice. Don't wait for God to do some magical thing in your heart. No, just step out and help us build a culture of honor. Be unfair and partial. Be specific and a little bit extra. And when you can, do it publicly and make sure it's loud enough for other people to affirm. I have a question for you guys before we wrap up on the screen. Pull out your phone, take a piece of paper. I don't know how you want to write this down. But I want you to actually document before we leave this morning. I want you to write down the names of 2 people that you can honor this week and how you can specifically honor them in a way that's unfair, a little extra and loud. Just 2 people this week. Just say, who am I going to honor? Could be someone in the room. Could be a spouse. Could be a friend. Man, imagine a coworker. Right? Imagine some of you work in places where people don't believe in Jesus. And can you just imagine what that would do? What I love about honor is it translates in every situation. Imagine what would happen if we got over ourselves and at lunch break or at that one meeting, you just say, hey guys, I know the meeting's over, but I just want to give a shout out to Bucky over there. Man, this guy kills it. I don't see anybody, like nobody in this company works as hard as him. Nobody, including you, boss. Nobody. There's nobody like Bucky. He's the man. I just want to say, man, I see you. I think it's amazing. I think you're killing it. And everybody in the room's like, that's awkward. But I wish somebody would say that about me. And Bucky would never forget it. Because that's what honor does. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. Think of 2 names, people you can honor this week. And I want you to think of how you can honor them and what you can do to lift them up. And then watch to see the joy that God invites you to be a part of. It may not happen the first, second, or third time, but you keep practicing, and I promise that you will find the joy.